The air conditioner gave one final gasp before shutting down. The ceiling fan slowed to a halt. The digital clock on the microwave blinked out, and the entire house sank into a suffocating silence. My son shouted from his room, "Dad! The power's gone!" At first, I thought it was just a neighborhood outage. Bad luck. During the worst heat wave we'd had in years. But then I stepped outside. Every house on my street buzzed with cool, humming AC. Lights flickered in kitchens. TVs glowed behind curtains. Every house except mine. And standing smugly on the sidewalk, arms crossed with her ever-present clipboard, was Patricia Hendress, the woman everyone called HOA Karen. She had this sly smirk on her face, like she'd just pulled off the grandest power play of her life. "You're in violation," she said, without me even asking what she was doing there. "The HOA doesn't allow exterior generators, and since you refused to remove yours, I had no choice but to call maintenance. Consider this your final warning." My blood boiled. The so-called generator she was talking about was a small backup system I'd installed specifically for my son, who had asthma. In this kind of brutal heat, he needed the air filters running. Without them, he'd be gasping for breath by nightfall. I told her, "You cut off my power? That's illegal. My son's health depends on it." She shrugged, flipping through her papers. "Rules are rules. Maybe next time you'll think twice before ignoring the HOA bylaws." It wasn't just petty. It was dangerous. The thermostat inside was already climbing. Sweat pooled at my temples. My son's inhaler sat ready on his nightstand. But without cool air and circulation, his breathing would get worse by the hour. I tried to call the power company. They said there was no outage, no repairs scheduled. My line had been intentionally disconnected, at her request. My neighbor, who had seen Karen strutting around earlier, whispered to me over the fence. She bragged about making a call to the utilities. Said she was teaching you a lesson. That's when I realized this wasn't about a generator. This was about control. She wanted to break me down, humiliate me, force me to bow to her petty authority. But she had no idea I wasn't going to take it lying down. What she didn't know was that I had something she didn't. Hard evidence. And when it came time to show that evidence, the judge's face would burn as red as the heat wave choking us that day. By evening, the house had turned into an oven. The thermostat hit 92 inside, and my son was wheezing. His inhaler helped, but without the fan circulating air, it was like trying to breathe through a wet towel. I sat by his side, furious, watching his chest rise and fall with effort. That's when I made a decision. This wasn't just about my comfort anymore. It was about his safety. I grabbed my phone and started documenting everything. The sweltering temperature inside the house. My son struggling for breath. The fact that every other home on the block still had power, while mine sat in darkness. Then, I pulled up the security footage from earlier that afternoon, and there she was. Clear as day, Patricia, our infamous HOA Karen, walking up to the side of my house, clipboard tucked under her arm. She bent down near the meter, phone in hand, making a call. Just minutes later, my lights flickered off. She looked directly into the camera afterward with this smug grin, like she'd just won some war, only she was fighting. My stomach dropped, but at the same time I felt a strange sense of relief. She had made her move, and I had her caught in 4K. Still, evidence alone wasn't enough. I needed the authorities to see it. So I called the police, explaining the situation, emphasizing that my son's health was at risk. When the officer arrived, Karen was already outside again, pretending to water her shrubs while really keeping an eye on me. The officer asked me for details, and I showed him the footage. He frowned, scratching his head. "This looks bad," he admitted. "But utilities are tricky. If she really called it in and claimed you were in violation of something, it might not be as straightforward as you think." Of course, Karen overheard that. She practically skipped over, inserting herself into the conversation. "Officer, this man has been warned several times. He refuses to comply with HOA regulations. All I did was report it. The rest is up to the power company." She smiled sweetly, like butter wouldn't melt in her mouth, but I could see the cracks forming. The officer gave her a long look and said, "Ma'am, if your call directly caused this disconnection, you may be liable." For the first time all day, her smile faltered. Just for a second. I knew then this was going to court. And when that video rolled, her smug little empire of rules would crumble in front of everyone. The hearing came quicker than I expected. The officer filed a report, and with my son's medical condition in play, the case was pushed up the docket. By the time we walked into the courthouse, the air outside was still blistering. Ironic, considering the reason we were all there. Patricia strutted in like she owned the place. Clipboard in hand, hair pulled tight, lips pressed in a thin line of superiority. She even wore a blazer in the 90-degree weather, as if dressing like a lawyer might make her one. I sat quietly, my son next to me, still pale from the rough night he'd had. His inhaler peeked out of his pocket like a silent reminder of what her little power move had nearly cost. When the judge entered, everyone rose. The tension in the room was thick. Patricia whispered something to her attorney. Yes, she'd actually hired one, which told me she knew this was serious. My attorney leaned toward me and whispered, "Stay calm. The video will speak louder than any argument." The proceedings began with Patricia's side. Her lawyer painted me as a defiant homeowner who refused to follow community rules. He talked about bylaws, neighborhood harmony, and how my generator was unsightly and against regulations. Patricia nodded along with each word, shooting smug little glances my way. Then it was my turn. My lawyer didn't waste time. He held up a flash drive and said, "Your Honor, we have video evidence that will clarify exactly what happened." Patricia shifted in her seat, eyes narrowing. She leaned forward like she might interrupt, but her lawyer put a hand on her arm. The clerk loaded the footage. The screen flickered on. There she was, Patricia in full color, walking straight to my meter, phone pressed to her ear. She crouched, gestured, smirked, then walked away just as the power cut out. The room went silent. The judge's brows furrowed. He leaned back, lips tightening. Then, slowly, he leaned forward again, elbows on the desk. "Mrs. Hendress," he said, voice low but cutting, "would you like to explain why you are tampering with this man's power supply?" Patricia stammered, waving her hands. I wasn't tampering. I was making a lawful report. The HOA has every right." But the judge cut her off. "The HOA has rules, yes, but what I see here looks a lot less like a report and a lot more like malicious interference." Her face flushed deep red, and I knew in that moment things were about to take a turn she never expected. Patricia's mouth opened and closed like a fish gasping for air. The courtroom was dead silent, every eye locked on her. She glanced around as if searching for backup, but there was none. Even her own lawyer looked like he regretted taking her case. The judge leaned forward. "Mrs. Hendress, this video shows you making a call, gesturing at the meter and smirking immediately after the power shuts off. That isn't procedure. That's personal interference. Do you understand the seriousness of this?" Patricia stammered. But the generator, it violates the bylaws. I was enforcing the rules." The judge slammed his gavel lightly, cutting her off. "The bylaws do not grant you authority over utility connections, and they certainly do not give you the right to endanger a child's health. This isn't enforcement. This is abuse." A ripple of murmurs filled the courtroom. Even a few HOA members sitting in the back shifted uncomfortably, as if realizing their president had dragged them all into her mess. My lawyer rose. "Your Honor, my client's son has asthma. That night without power could have been catastrophic. We are seeking restitution for medical risk, emotional distress, and tampering with essential services." The judge nodded slowly, his eyes never leaving Patricia. "Frankly, I am inclined to agree." He turned to her lawyer. "Counselor, I suggest you advise your client to settle before I make a formal ruling." Patricia's face burned crimson. She whispered furiously to her attorney, her hands shaking. He finally sighed, then stood. "Your Honor, my client is prepared to offer a settlement." But the judge wasn't finished. He pointed a stern finger at Patricia. "And one more thing. You are hereby removed as president of the HOA, effective immediately. This court will not allow someone who abuses authority in this way to continue in a position of power. The room erupted. Gasps, whispers, even a stifled laugh from someone in the back. Patricia froze, eyes wide, as if the ground had just been ripped from beneath her. For the first time, the clipboard queen had no words, no smug grin, just silence. When it was over, I stepped outside with my son, who finally managed to smile. The heat wave still burned in the air, but somehow it felt cooler. Justice had stripped away her false power, and the whole neighborhood had seen it. Karen thought she could break me by cutting off my power. Instead, she cut off her own reign of control. And the look on that judge's face when the video played? That will stay with me forever. Thanks for watching. If you enjoyed this story, don't forget to like the video, drop a comment with your thoughts, and hit that subscribe button so you don't miss the next crazy HOA Karen drama.